I thought I'd hidden it well enough. Foundation layered thick, concealer padded until my fingertips went numb, sunglasses perched on my nose even though the sky was gray and threatening rain. But when I walked into that corner store for milk, the man behind the counter saw right through every layer I'd built. He was tall, bald, covered in faded tattoos that crawled up his neck like stories he'd never tell out loud. His eyes, God, his eyes. They didn't just look at me. They saw me. "Who did that to you?" he asked, his voice low and certain. I froze, started to lie. He came around that counter with the kind of controlled purpose that should have terrified me, and said 5 words that changed everything. "You're coming home with me." I didn't know him. I didn't know he'd spent 7 years learning to recognize the exact moment someone's about to shatter. I just knew that when he looked at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Safe. You will feel so many emotions in this story of second chances and forbidden love. Please support us by clicking subscribe to the channel. I thought I'd hidden it well enough. Foundation layered thick until my fingertips went numb. Concealer patted into the purple-blue shadow that bloomed beneath my eye like some poisonous flower. I even wore sunglasses, though the Seattle sky hung gray and heavy. Threatening rain that never quite fell. Just another woman running errands on a Tuesday afternoon. Just another trip to the corner store for milk because I'd let the carton in my fridge go sour, the same way I'd let everything else in my life curdle into something unrecognizable. The bell above the door chimed when I walked in. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that particular kind of harsh brightness that makes everyone look sick. I kept my head down, grabbed a gallon of 2% from the cooler in back, made my way to the register. That's when I saw him for the first time. Really saw him. Tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his black t-shirt like he'd been built for manual labor. Completely bald, his head smooth and somehow elegant despite the tattoos that crawled up his neck like vines seeking sunlight. More ink covered his arms. Geometric patterns. Words I couldn't quite read. Dates that probably meant something. His hands were scarred across the knuckles. I set the milk on the counter. Fumbled for my wallet. Waited for him to scan it. To take my money. To let me disappear back into my carefully constructed lie. He didn't scan it. He just looked at me. Not at the sunglasses, but through them somehow, like he could see past the tinted lenses straight into the truth I'd been hiding. His eyes were gray-green, the color of ocean water before a storm, and they held something I hadn't expected. Not pity, not curiosity, but recognition. Like he'd seen this movie before and knew exactly how it ended. "Who did that to you?" His voice was low, careful, each word measured like he knew the weight they carried. My throat tightened. The store suddenly felt too small, too bright, too exposed. It's nothing. I didn't finish the lie. Couldn't, because he came around the counter and I should have been terrified, this huge man with prison tattoos and scars moving toward me. But I wasn't. He didn't rush, didn't crowd me, just moved with this deliberate purpose that felt almost choreographed, like someone who'd learned to control every muscle, every impulse. Don't lie to me, not a threat, a request, maybe even a plea. I stepped back anyway. Instinct. Self-preservation. The same survival mechanism that had kept me with David for 8 months, convincing myself it would get better. That I could fix this if I just tried harder, loved better, stopped making him angry. It's complicated. It's not. He stood there, 3 feet away, giving me space but somehow filling the entire store with his presence. The tattoos on his neck shifted when he swallowed. I noticed his hands opening and closing at his sides, like he was actively stopping himself from clenching them into fists. "Get your stuff. You're coming home with me." The words hit me like a physical thing. I actually felt them land in my chest, felt my heart rate spike. This was it. This was the moment every true crime podcast warned about. The stranger who seems helpful but isn't. The predator disguised as a savior. "I don't even know you." He looked at me for a long moment. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Somewhere in the back, a refrigerator unit kicked on. Outside, the Seattle rain finally started to fall, tapping against the window like fingernails. "You don't have to know me. You just have to trust me long enough to get somewhere safe. And God help me." I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe because when I looked at him, I didn't see danger in those storm-colored eyes. I saw something else. Something that felt like rage. Yes, but controlled. Buried deep under layers of discipline and hard-won restraint. I saw someone who understood exactly what it was like to be trapped, to feel like the walls were closing in and there was no way out except through. I grabbed my purse. He picked up the milk I'd come for, scanned it, paid for it himself before I could protest. Then he held the door open and waited for me to make the choice. I walked through it. His truck was parked around back, an older Ford, dark blue, the kind contractors drove. It smelled like sawdust and coffee. The passenger seat was worn but clean. He opened the door for me, waited until I was inside, then closed it gently. Not a slam, a click. We didn't speak as he drove. I watched the city blur past my window, the same streets I'd walked 1,000 times, now looking different somehow. Foreign, like I was seeing them for the first time, or maybe the last. He drove carefully, hands at 10 and 2, using his turn signal at every corner like someone who'd memorized the rules and followed them religiously. When we pulled up to a small apartment building on the edge of Capitol Hill, he killed the engine and turned to me. The rain drummed on the roof. Inside the truck, everything felt suspended, like we existed in a bubble outside normal time. You can leave anytime, but you shouldn't be alone tonight. Not with someone who thinks they can put their hands on you. His jaw tightened. Something flickered behind his eyes. Old fury, carefully leashed. Men like that don't stop. Not on their own. His name was Marcus. Marcus Chen. He told me that first night while making coffee in a kitchen that surprised me with its aggressive normalcy. Clean counters wiped down to a shine, a dish rack by the sink holding 2 plates and 2 mugs, a calendar on the fridge marked with what looked like work shifts in neat block letters. Everything in its place, everything controlled. The apartment was small. A living room that flowed into the kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, furniture that didn't match but was clean, cared for. A couch that looked like it came from a thrift store, reupholstered with dark fabric. No television, just a radio on the windowsill. Books stacked on a makeshift shelf. Library books, I noticed, with due date cards still tucked inside. He lived like someone who'd learned to exist with very little and treated what he had with reverence. He gave me the bedroom without discussion. Showed me where the towels were, where he kept the extra toothbrushes still in packaging, where the lock was on the door. "Lock it," he said. "I won't knock unless you ask me to." I did lock it, sat on the edge of his bed, made with hospital corners, sheets that smelled like generic detergent, and waited for him to try the handle, to test me, to reveal what he really wanted. He never did. In the morning, there was coffee already made, still hot in the pot. A clean towel set out on the bathroom counter, folded into a precise rectangle. A note on the kitchen table in that same neat handwriting. "Call if you need anything." Emma with a phone number below. He was already gone to work. I went home that day, told myself it had been one strange night, an overreaction that I could handle David on my own, that I didn't need some tattooed stranger with secrets playing white knight. I cleaned my apartment, threw out the spoiled milk, covered the bruise with fresh makeup. Went to work at the insurance office where I processed claims and tried to ignore the looks from co-workers who'd started noticing I wore scarves even in warm weather. But Marcus started appearing in my life like he'd always been there. At the bus stop 3 blocks from my office building, reading a paperback with a creased spine. He looked up when I approached, nodded once, went back to his book, didn't speak, didn't approach. Just there, outside the Safeway where I stopped after work, loading 2x4s into the bed of his truck, sawdust coating his forearms. He saw me through the window, raised one hand in greeting, didn't follow me inside. At the laundromat on Thursday evening, folding clothes with the same careful precision he seemed to apply to everything. I loaded my basket into a machine, and he was suddenly there beside me, dropping quarters into the slot before I could. "You don't have to do that," I said. I know. That was it. That was the whole conversation. But something about the way he said it made my chest tight. Like it wasn't about the quarters. Like it was about something else entirely. He didn't talk much about himself, I noticed. When I finally worked up the courage to ask where he was from, he said, "around," and changed the subject so smoothly I almost didn't catch it. When I asked about family, his face went carefully blank. "Not in the picture," he said. "Haven't been for a while." But he asked about me. Really asked. Like the answers mattered. what I did for work, what I liked to read, why I'd moved to Seattle. He remembered everything I told him, brought it up later in ways that made me realize he'd been listening. Actually listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. He noticed things other people didn't, that I was left-handed, that I bit my lip when I was nervous, that I flinched when men raised their voices nearby, even in normal conversation, that I always sat facing the door. He fixed the wheel on my suitcase without being asked, catching me one afternoon as I struggled with it outside my building. Crouched down right there on the sidewalk, produced a screwdriver from somewhere, tightened the bolts until it rolled smooth again. "You carry that thing around broken?" he asked. I kept meaning to fix it. Now you don't have to. When the elevator in my building broke and I was stuck carrying laundry up 3 flights, he appeared like a ghost, taking the basket from my hands before I could protest. His arms didn't even strain under the weight. He set it inside my door, nodded, left. People in the neighborhood started watching him, watching us. Mrs. Kim from 3B asked if he was my boyfriend, her voice careful, concerned. The teenage boys who usually catcalled from their stoop went quiet when he was around. The guy who sometimes slept in the alley looked at Marcus with something like recognition, then quickly looked away. One night I worked late, processing a backlog of claims because I couldn't face going home to my empty apartment and the possibility David might be waiting. When I finally left the building at 9:30, the parking lot was dark. Most of the streetlights burned out. I clutched my keys between my fingers the way women do, made my way toward my car. Marcus materialized from the shadows near the parking garage entrance. I actually gasped, stumbled back. "Sorry," he said, hands up, non-threatening. "Didn't mean to scare you. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here alone at night." My heart was still pounding. Part fear, part something else I didn't want to name. "Are you following me?" He looked at me for a long moment. The parking lot lights that still worked cast orange shadows across his face. Yes, the honesty of it stunned me. "I am," he continued, "because someone should be. Someone should make sure you get home safe. That's not normal. I know what it is, and I'm doing it anyway." He walked me to my car, stood there while I unlocked it, got in, started the engine, waited until I'd pulled out of the lot before heading back to his truck. I watched him in my rearview mirror, this bald man with tattoos and secrets, standing guard over nothing now that I was gone. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt safer than I had in months. It was Jenny from accounting who pulled me aside the next day in the break room, her voice low and urgent, her phone already out. "That guy who's been hanging around you? Do you know who he is?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" She turned her phone toward me. A news article from 7 years ago, a mugshot. Marcus Chen, younger but unmistakable, staring at the camera with dead eyes. "My cousin's a paralegal," Jenny said. "She recognized him from a case. He did time. Sarah, like, serious time." I stared at the photo, at the word assault in the headline, at the sentence, 7 years. What did he do? Jenny's expression was pure concern. "You need to stay away from him. Whatever you think is happening, whatever he's told you." She kept talking, but I stopped hearing. All I could think was, he never lied. He never pretended to be something he wasn't. He just never told me the truth. That night, I went looking for him. I found him at the corner store where we'd first met. Turned out he worked there, stocking shelves during the day, running the register at night, doing whatever his boss needed. When I pushed through the door, the bell chiming overhead, he looked up from counting inventory. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes told me he'd been expecting this, maybe even dreading it. "We need to talk." He set down the clipboard, nodded once, flipped the sign on the door to "back in 15 minutes, without asking what this was about. He already knew. He led me to the storage room and back. It smelled like cardboard and industrial floor cleaner. Boxes of chips and canned goods stacked to the ceiling. A single bulb hanging from a wire overhead. He leaned against a shelving unit, arms crossed over his chest, and waited for me to speak first, patient, still, like he had all the time in the world and nothing left to lose. "Jenny said you were in prison." I was... No hesitation. No excuse. Just fact. She said it was serious. 7 years. Aggravated assault. Got out 8 months ago. The words landed between us like stones thrown into water, ripples spreading outward. I'd spent 2 hours the night before down a rabbit hole of court documents and news articles, my laptop screen glowing in the darkness of my apartment. A bar fight in Tacoma. A man named Ryan Wells, who'd grabbed Marcus's girlfriend by the throat, shoved her against a wall, Marcus putting him in the hospital with a fractured skull, broken ribs, internal bleeding, the prosecution arguing premeditation because of the severity, the defense arguing protection, the jury seeing a man with tattoos and a history of street fighting and deciding he was guilty of something, even if it wasn't exactly what happened. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have gotten in my truck if I had? Fair point. I probably wouldn't have. I definitely shouldn't have. What happened? The real story. He looked at me for a long moment, like deciding if I could handle the truth. Then he started talking, his voice low and measured, like he'd told this story before to parole boards and therapists and judges who'd already made up their minds. Her name was Vanessa. We'd been together 2 years. She was trying to leave her ex, guy named Ryan, who didn't understand what "unknown" meant. We were at a bar in Tacoma, just trying to have a normal night. He showed up, started yelling at her, got physical. Marcus's jaw tightened, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. I grew up fighting. My dad taught me before he left, and the streets taught me after. Hit first or get hit. That was the rule. So when Ryan grabbed her, when I saw his hand around her throat, I didn't think, I just moved. You hurt him badly. I put him in a coma for 3 days. The honesty of it was brutal. No softening. No excuses. The prosecutor said I went too far, that I kept hitting him after he was down, that I wanted to kill him. My lawyer said I was protecting someone I loved. The jury saw a guy with tattoos who grew up in foster homes and decided I was dangerous. He pushed off the shelving unit, took a step closer. Not threatening, just closing the distance between us. I'm not proud of what I did. But Vanessa's alive because I stopped him. And he's alive because 3 people pulled me off. I served my time. 7 years of anger management, therapy, learning to count to 10 before I react. 7 years of becoming someone else. I should have been terrified. Every rational part of my brain screamed that I should walk out of this storage room and never look back. Instead, I heard myself asking the question that had kept me awake all night. Is that why you helped me? Because you saw someone else who needed protection. His eyes met mine, and I saw the weight he carried there. The exhaustion of being judged every single day, of trying to prove he was different now while knowing most people would never believe it. I spent 7 years watching men who hurt women, men who bragged about it in the yard, men who got light sentences because they wore suits and had good lawyers and knew how to work the system. His voice dropped lower, rougher. I learned what it looks like when someone's about to break. The way they hold themselves, the way they apologize for things that aren't their fault, the way they flinch. He stopped, and something in his expression cracked open just enough for me to see the pain underneath. When you walked into my store with that bruise, with those sunglasses covering what someone had done to you, I saw Vanessa. I saw every woman I couldn't help because I was locked up. And I swore— He stopped again, swallowed hard. I swore I'd never stand by again. Never let it happen if I could stop it. The storage room felt too small suddenly, too intimate. I could hear him breathing, could see the pulse jumping in his neck. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. I'm not asking you to forgive what I did. I'm just asking you to let me help. The right way. The legal way. The way I should have done it the first time. I was still processing this, still trying to reconcile the gentleman who fixed my suitcase with the prisoner who'd nearly killed someone, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from David. I know where you've been going. I know who you've been with. Big mistake, Sarah. Come home tonight, or I'm coming to get you. I showed Marcus the screen, watched his face go carefully blank, that controlled stillness settling over him like armor. But I saw his hands, saw them curl into fists so tight his knuckles went white, saw him actively force them to open, finger by finger, the same way he'd probably learned to do in prison when rage threatened to consume him. You can't go back there. Not a question, a statement of fact. I don't know where else to go. Yes, you do. He took the phone from my hands, his fingers careful not to touch mine, and started taking screenshots of David's message. Evidence. Documentation. The legal way. You stay with me. Not just tonight. Until we figure this out. Marcus, I can't. I'm not that person anymore. The guy who solves problems with his fists. I can't be. My parole officer checks in twice a week. One wrong move and I go back inside. But I will protect you. Within the law. Within the rules. He handed my phone back. Do you understand? I'm choosing to help you the right way, even though every instinct I have is screaming at me to find David and make him regret ever touching you. That's who I am now. That's who I have to be. I looked at this man, this ex-convict with tattoos and scars and 7 years of hard-won redemption, and made a choice that terrified me. Okay, I'll stay with you. Relief flooded his face for just a moment before the careful control returned. He nodded once, picked up his clipboard. I need to finish inventory. Then we'll go. Pack what you need. We'll get it tomorrow when he's at work. I started to leave, then stopped at the door. Marcus? Yeah. Thank you. For being honest, he looked at me with those storm-colored eyes. I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Lying is what got me locked up in the first place. That night, lying in Marcus's bed while he took the couch again, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what I'd just agreed to. Wondered if I was running from one dangerous man straight into the arms of another. But when I closed my eyes, all I could see was the way Marcus's hands had shaken when he'd forced them to unclench. The way he'd chosen evidence over action. The way he'd told me the truth even knowing I might run. And I realized I wasn't afraid of Marcus. I was afraid of what David might make him become. The next few days felt like living in a strange parallel universe where everything looked normal, but nothing actually was. I slept in Marcus's bedroom while he took the couch. I went to work and processed insurance claims like my life wasn't falling apart. Marcus went to his job at the store, checked in with his parole officer every Tuesday and Friday, lived a life of rigid routine and careful choices that I was only beginning to understand. His parole officer was a woman named Sandra Torres, 40-something, sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that had seen every con and excuse in the book. She showed up at the apartment on Friday evening, unannounced, the way parole officers do. Knocked 3 times, firm and authoritative. Marcus opened the door with that careful stillness I was learning to recognize. Ms. Torres, Chen, we need to talk. Her eyes found me on the couch, and something flickered across her face. Not quite disapproval, but close. This is Sarah, Marcus said. She's staying here temporarily. She's in a dangerous situation with an ex-partner. Sandra stepped inside without asking. Looked around the apartment with professional assessment, checking for drugs, weapons, anything that would violate his parole. How long is temporarily? I don't know yet. You know the rules about cohabitation. You know I need to approve any changes to your living situation. I do. And I'm asking for approval. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. I stood up, trying to look less like a scared girl and more like someone who had a right to be here. He's helping me, I said. I filed a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend. Marcus is just making sure I'm safe until... Until what? Sandra's voice wasn't unkind, but it wasn't warm either. Until the ex-boyfriend gets tired of harassing you. Until he violates the restraining order. Until Mr. Chen here decides to handle things the way he used to. Marcus flinched. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. That's not going to happen, he said quietly. I know what's at stake. Sandra looked at him for a long moment, then at me, then back at him. I'm approving this temporarily. 2 weeks. After that, we reassess. And Chen, you step 1 toe out of line. You even think about confronting this ex-boyfriend. And you're done. Understood. Understood. After she left, Marcus sat down on the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The careful control he maintained cracked just enough for me to see the exhaustion underneath. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to complicate your life. You didn't complicate it. You gave me a reason to prove I'm different. He looked up at me, and his expression was so raw it made my chest ache. Do you know what it's like? Having people wait for you to fail? Having everyone assume you're one bad day away from being that person again? No, but I know what it's like to feel trapped. We talked that night. Really talked. The way people do at 3 a.m. when sleep won't come and the darkness makes honesty easier. He told me about prison, not the violence everyone imagines, but the crushing routine. Wake at 6, count at 6:30, Breakfast at 7, work detail, count, lunch, count, recreation, count, dinner, count, lights out at 10, day after day after day, knowing exactly how many days you had left. He told me about the anger management classes where they taught you to identify triggers, about the cognitive behavioral therapy where they made you examine why you did what you did, about the GED program where he'd finished high school at 32, about the carpentry vocational training where he'd learned to build things instead of breaking them. I wrote letters, he said, to everyone I hurt. Vanessa, Ryan, my foster parents, everyone I'd let down or disappointed or destroyed. Did anyone write back? Ryan did. 3 years in, he said he didn't forgive me, but he understood why I did it, said his therapist told him to write back, said maybe we were both broken people who broke each other worse. His voice was so quiet I had to lean closer to hear. That's when it really hit me. That I'd become the thing I thought I was stopping. I'd become the man who used violence to solve problems. Just like my father. Just like everyone who'd ever hurt me. I told him about David then. About how we'd met at a conference. How charming he'd been at first. How the controls started so small I didn't even notice. Checking my phone, asking where I'd been, getting upset if I didn't text back immediately. How it escalated to shoving, to gripping my arms hard enough to bruise, to that backhand across my face when I'd suggested maybe we needed space. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you walk away from that fight? He understood then. We both knew what it was like to be trapped by our own choices, by circumstances, by the person we thought we had to be. The days developed a rhythm. Marcus left for work at 7, leaving coffee already made and a note telling me to call if I needed anything. I went to my job, came back, and we'd make dinner together in his small kitchen. He taught me to cook properly, not just heating things up, but actually cooking, chopping vegetables, seasoning meat, building flavors. His hands, scarred and rough, moved with surprising gentleness. Prison food is garbage, he explained. So when I got out, I learned to cook. One of the few pleasures I can afford. I started to see the architecture of his second chance, the job he never missed, even when he was sick. The rent paid on time, in cash, with a receipt he kept filed in a folder. The way he stayed away from alcohol, from anyone from his old life, from anything that could jeopardize his freedom. His apartment was a testament to someone rebuilding from nothing. Mismatched furniture from thrift stores, books from the library that he read and returned on time, meals cooked at home because eating out was a luxury he couldn't afford. Everything he owned could probably fit in 2 boxes, but it was his, earned clean. One evening, we were washing dishes side by side. I was drying while he washed, and our hands touched accidentally when he handed me a plate. He pulled back immediately like I'd burned him. Sorry. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. And we both knew it. There was something building between us. Something neither of us wanted to acknowledge because it felt impossible and wrong and right all at the same time. Can I ask you something? I said. Yeah. What happened to Vanessa? After. His hands stilled in the soapy water. She testified at my trial. Said I saved her life. Said Ryan would have killed her if I hadn't stopped him. The prosecution made her look weak, made it seem like she couldn't tell the difference between protection and violence. Do you still talk to her? No. She moved to Portland, got married, has a kid now, I think. I looked her up once after I got out, just to make sure she was okay. Then I deleted the search history and promised myself I wouldn't do it again. Why? Because she deserves a life without me in it, without reminders of the worst night of her life. The selflessness of it struck me silent. This man who'd given up 7 years for someone he loved, who still carried the weight of that choice, who'd let her go completely because he thought that's what she needed. We finished the dishes in silence. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the air between us charged with things unsaid. That's when someone pounded on the door. Not knocked. Pounded. Hard, aggressive, the way police do or the way men do when they're angry. Marcus went rigid, every muscle in his body tensed. I saw him force himself to breathe, to count, to not react the way his instincts screamed at him to react. Stay here. He moved to the door, looked through the peephole. His expression shifted to something I couldn't read. Not fear exactly, but wariness. Recognition. He opened the door slowly. A man stood there. Older than Marcus, maybe 50, with the same kind of prison tattoos crawling up his arms. His face was weathered, hard-lived, with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Heard you been playing hero, Marcus." The man's smile was all teeth and no warmth. He looked past Marcus, saw me standing in the kitchen, and his smile widened. "We need to talk about old debts." The man's name was Derek Lawson. Marcus told me that after he'd finally gotten him to leave, not by force, but by patience, by standing in the doorway like an immovable wall until Derek got bored and walked away. But I'd heard enough of their conversation to understand that Derek wasn't going to stay gone. "How do you know him?" I asked. Marcus leaned against the closed door, eyes shut, breathing carefully measured, counting to 10 the way they'd taught him in therapy. When he opened his eyes, he looked exhausted. "We served time together, overlapped for 3 years at Monroe. He got out 6 months before I did. What does he want? What men like Derek always want. Money, loyalty, someone to help him with whatever scheme he's running. He thinks because we were cellmates, I owe him something. Do you?" "No." The word was flat, final. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching. "He's not going to give up, is he?" "Probably not." That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept hearing Derek's voice through the door, the casual threat in his tone when he'd looked at me and said, "Pretty girl, heard she's got an ex causing problems. I could help with that, for old times' sake." The offer had hung in the air like poison, and I'd seen something flash across Marcus's face. Temptation, maybe, or just the ghost of who he used to be. David escalated just like Marcus predicted. Started showing up outside my office building during lunch breaks, standing across the street just watching. Left voicemails that started apologetic. "Baby, I'm sorry, I was drunk, it won't happen again." And ended threatening, "You think you can just leave me? You think some ex-con can protect you?" He somehow got my work email, sent messages that HR flagged as concerning, showed up at the Safeway where I'd been shopping, following me through the aisles until I abandoned my cart and ran. Marcus documented everything, made me forward every email, every voicemail, every text, took photos of David whenever he appeared, time-stamped and dated, helped me file police reports that officers took with barely concealed skepticism. "Ma'am, he hasn't actually done anything illegal yet. Standing on a public sidewalk isn't a crime." The restraining order I'd filed felt like tissue paper, just words on a document that meant nothing if David chose to ignore them. The tension wore on both of us. I watched Marcus check over his shoulder constantly, saw him tense every time a car slowed near us on the street, noticed how he positioned himself between me and every potential threat. He stopped sleeping, I think. Some nights I'd get up for water and find him on the couch, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. His parole officer started asking more questions. Why had Marcus changed his routine? Why was he spending so much time at addresses that weren't his work or home? Why had several people reported seeing him loitering near my office building? "I'm protecting someone," Marcus explained during one of Sandra's visits. "That's not a crime. It is, if it looks like stalking. It is if you're inserting yourself into a situation that could turn violent. So I'm supposed to just let him hurt her. You're supposed to let the police handle it. That's what they're for." Marcus's laugh was bitter. "The police don't handle it until she's already hurt. Until it's too late. You know that as well as I do." Sandra's expression softened, just slightly. "I know. But Chen, you need to understand something. The system isn't fair. It's especially not fair to people like you. If something happens, if this ex-boyfriend of hers ends up hurt, or if you're even present when something violent occurs, they're going to blame you. Your record makes you an easy target." "I know." "Do you?" "Because I've seen this story before. Good intentions, bad outcomes. You want to help this girl? Stay clean, stay away from confrontation, document everything and let the legal system work." After she left, Marcus punched the wall. Once, hard enough to put a dent in the drywall. Then he stared at his bloody knuckles like he didn't recognize his own hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry, that was stupid. That was human." He looked at me, surprised. "You're trying so hard to be perfect," I said, "to never make a mistake. But you're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be frustrated with a system that failed you and is failing me. If I let myself be angry, I become him again. The guy who put Ryan in the hospital, the guy who couldn't control himself. That's not true. Anger doesn't make you that person. What you do with it does. But I could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that one wrong move would unravel everything he'd built. Derek showed up again 3 days later. This time at the corner store during Marcus's shift. I was there, had stopped by after work because being alone in the apartment felt suffocating. I was browsing the magazine rack when I heard Derek's voice. "Marcus, my man. Still playing it straight? What do you want, Derek?" "Just checking in. Making sure you haven't forgotten your friends." "We're not friends." Derek laughed, picked up a pack of gum, tossed it on the counter. "See, that hurts. After everything we went through together, the long nights, the hard times, you don't just walk away from that." I did. I walked away from all of it. Derek's eyes found me then, and something cold slithered down my spine. "That your girl? The one with the abusive ex?" Marcus's voice went flat. "Leave her out of this. I'm just saying, problems like that, they don't solve themselves. Guy like her ex, he needs to be taught a lesson. And I know people who specialize in teaching lessons. No. Derek leaned against the counter, grinning. "Come on, Marcus. You're telling me you haven't thought about it. Haven't imagined what it would feel like to make him hurt the way he hurt her? Every day. But I'm not doing it. Why not? Because of some parole officer? Because the system that locked you up for protecting someone suddenly deserves your respect? Because I'm not that person anymore." Derek's expression shifted. The friendly mask dropped away, revealing something harder underneath. "You're exactly that person. You'll always be that person. The system doesn't give second chances, Marcus. It just gives you more chances to fail." After Derek left, Marcus was silent for a long time. We closed the store together, him checking locks and shutting off lights with mechanical precision. In the truck on the way back to his apartment, I finally spoke. "Is he right? Are you always going to be that person?" "I don't know." The honesty of it scared me more than anything else he could have said. "But I'm trying not to be. Every single day, I'm trying." That night, I lay in Marcus's bed and listened to him move around the apartment, heard him on the phone, his voice low, talking to someone, his parole officer, maybe, or a sponsor from the anger management program, trying to do the right thing, trying to follow the rules in a game that was rigged against him. I was still awake at 2 a.m. when my phone lit up with a notification, a message from an unknown number. "I'm done waiting. You want to play games with restraining orders and ex-cons? Fine. But remember, I know where you work. I know where you live. And I know your tough guy can't protect you without breaking his parole. Come home, Sarah, before someone gets hurt." I stared at the message, my heart pounding, started to get up, to show Marcus, to figure out what to do next. Then I heard it. A car engine outside, too close, running too rough. I went to the window, pulled back the curtain just enough to see David's BMW, parked across the street, engine idling, and he was staring up at Marcus's apartment window, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone. He knew where I was. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Just watched David's car from the window, watched him sit there for 2 hours before finally driving away. When Marcus emerged from the bathroom at 6, Chiara's already dressed for work, he found me still standing by the window. How long has he been gone? 4 hours? Maybe 5. Marcus moved beside me, looked down at the empty street. He was here. Yeah. Did he do anything? Try to come up? Knock on the door? No, he just sat there, watching. Marcus pulled out his phone, took photos of the street, the timestamp, wrote notes in a memo app about what I'd told him. Evidence, documentation, the legal way. "We need to call the police," he said. "And tell them what? That my ex-boyfriend parked on a public street? That he's violating the restraining order by being within 500 feet of you? Marcus, this is your address. The restraining order specifies my address, my workplace, not here." I watched his jaw tighten, watched him force himself to stay calm when everything in him probably wanted to storm out and find David. Then we document it, add it to the file, show a pattern of escalation. But his voice carried doubt. We both knew how this worked, how the system moved slowly while danger moved fast. I went to work that day feeling like I was walking through a dream. Everything looked normal, my desk, my computer, the insurance claims that needed processing, but nothing felt real. I kept checking the parking lot through the window, expecting to see David's BMW, kept jumping every time someone knocked on a door or raised their voice. Jenny avoided me. So did most of the other women in the office. Word had gotten around about Marcus, about his record, about the fact that I was staying with an ex-convict. I heard whispers in the break room, saw the way people looked at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. "You know he's just using you, right?" one of the younger assistants said during lunch, her voice carrying across the room. "Guys like that? They find vulnerable women and manipulate them. It's what they do." I didn't respond, just gathered my things and ate in my car. Marcus picked me up after work, something he'd started doing since David had found his apartment. He pulled up to the curb and I practically ran to the truck, climbing in and locking the door behind me. "Bad day? People think you're manipulating me." He was quiet for a long moment, hands tight on the steering wheel. "Maybe they're right." "Don't." "I'm serious, Sarah. Look at your life. You're hiding in a stranger's apartment, isolated from your friends, scared to go anywhere alone. How is that different from what David was doing?" "Because you're giving me a choice. Because you're not the one I'm afraid of." But I could see the doubt eating at him. The fear that maybe he was part of the problem instead of the solution. It all came to a head on Thursday night. I was working late again, trying to catch up on claims I'd been neglecting. Marcus was supposed to pick me up at 8, but he'd texted saying his shift ran long. His coworker called in sick and he was covering. He'd be there by 9. I finished up at 8:30, gathered my things. The office was empty, everyone else gone home hours ago. I took the elevator down to the parking garage, my keys already in my hand, phone in my pocket with Marcus's number ready to dial. The garage was darker than usual. 2 of the overhead lights were out, leaving pools of shadow between the cars. My footsteps echoed on the concrete. I was halfway to my car when I heard other footsteps behind me. I spun around. David stood there, and he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, big guys, the kind you hired when you wanted to intimidate someone. One had a tattoo of a snake winding up his neck. The other wore brass knuckles. "Sarah." David's voice was eerily calm. Too calm. "You really thought a restraining order would stop me." I backed up, reached for my phone. I wouldn't do that. Snake tattoo moved faster than I expected, knocking the phone from my hand. It skittered across the concrete, landing somewhere in the shadows. "We just want to talk," David said, taking a step closer. "That's all. You and me, like adults. Stay away from me." "Or what? You'll call your pet criminal?" "He's not here, Sarah. Just us." I did the only thing I could think of. I ran, not toward my car where they could corner me, but toward the stairwell, toward the exit, toward light and people and witnesses. I made it maybe 10 feet before David grabbed my arm, yanked me back hard enough that I stumbled. I screamed. The sound echoed through the concrete structure, bouncing off walls and cars. I fought, knees, elbows, everything the self-defense videos had taught me, but there were 3 of them and 1 of me. Then I heard tires squealing. Marcus's truck appeared around the corner, headlights flooding the scene like a spotlight. He was out before it fully stopped, the door hanging open, engine still running. He moved with purpose but not rage, every step controlled, deliberate. "Let her go." His voice was deadly calm, quieter than I'd ever heard it. David laughed, but I felt his grip on my arm loosen slightly. "Or what? You'll hit me. Go ahead. Violate your parole. Go back where you belong." What happened next was the most deliberate, calculated thing I'd ever witnessed. Marcus pulled out his phone, held it high, hit record. 3 men assaulting a woman in a parking garage. I'm a witness. I've called 911. His voice was steady, clear, narrating for the camera. "This is David Montgomery, Sarah Mitchell's ex-boyfriend, violating an active restraining order. These are 2 unidentified males assisting him. I am Marcus Chen, currently on parole. I am not touching anyone. I am documenting a crime." David's face went pale. His friends looked at each other, suddenly uncertain. "The police have been called," Marcus continued, still recording. "I am remaining at a safe distance. I am not engaging physically. I am a witness." The sound of sirens started in the distance. David's grip on my arm released completely. He took a step back. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." The 3 of them ran, just bolted for the stairs, leaving me standing there shaking. Marcus stayed exactly where he was, phone still recording, until the police arrived. He filmed everything: their arrival, his explanation, me giving my statement, the officers checking the garage for David and his friends. He'd outmaneuvered them without throwing a single punch, but the aftermath was complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. The police questioned why Marcus was there, how he'd known I was in danger, whether this was evidence of stalking on his part. David had already filed a counter-complaint, claiming Marcus had been following him, threatening him, using me as an excuse to harass him. Sandra Torres arrived within the hour, her expression grave. She pulled Marcus aside, spoke to him in low tones I couldn't quite hear, but I saw his face, saw the resignation there, and my stomach dropped. The local news picked it up. Ex-con involved in parking garage incident ran on the 10 o'clock broadcast, complete with Marcus's mugshot from 7 years ago. The comments section online was vicious. Once a criminal, always a criminal. That poor girl is going to end up hurt because some thug is pretending to be her hero. Send him back to prison where he belongs. My mother called, sobbing, begging me to come home. My sister sent a long text about how I was making terrible choices, how I needed therapy, how I was trauma-bonded to someone dangerous. Coworkers whispered. Strangers on social media who'd never met either of us debated whether Marcus was a saint or a monster. Through it all, Marcus sat silent, answering questions when asked, providing evidence when requested. Never once defending himself with emotion, only facts. I watched him shoulder the weight of everyone's judgment, everyone's fear, everyone's assumption that he was one bad day away from becoming that person again. 2 days later, Sandra showed up at the apartment. Her face was serious. We need to talk, Chen. David Montgomery's lawyer is pushing hard. They're arguing you've been harassing their client, using Sarah as cover. They want your parole revoked. She looked at me, then back at Marcus. They're claiming you violated multiple conditions. Associating with your victim demographic, engaging in confrontational behavior, failing to maintain stable housing arrangements without approval. I followed every rule. I know, but the problem is, it's your word against his, and right now, they're building a case that you're a danger to society. Marcus's face went blank, that careful control settling over him like a mask. What do I need to do? Tell me everything. Every single detail. Because right now, you're one hearing away from going back to Monroe. And this time, there's no early release. I'd spent 8 months being afraid. Afraid of David, afraid of what people thought, afraid of making the wrong choice. But sitting in that apartment, watching Marcus face losing everything he'd built, something inside me snapped, not broke, snapped into place. I wasn't going to be the victim in someone else's story anymore. I was going to be the one who fought back. I need to see David's ex-girlfriend, I told Marcus that night. The one before me. Sarah. That's not safe. Nothing about this is safe, but she'll have evidence. He doesn't change his patterns. Her name was Lisa Chen, no relation to Marcus, just one of those cosmic coincidences. I found her through mutual Facebook friends, sent a message explaining who I was. She responded within an hour. Meet me tomorrow. I've been waiting for someone to finally ask. We met at a coffee shop in Bellingham, an hour north. She was 32 and a nurse, with the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much. When she sat down across from me, she set a manila folder on the table. He told you I was crazy, didn't he? He said you were unstable, that you made things up. Of course he did. She opened the folder. Photos spilled out, bruises on her arms, her ribs, her face, medical records from 3 different emergency room visits. A restraining order she'd filed that had mysteriously been dismissed 6 months later. He's connected, Lisa said. His father's a lawyer. His uncle's a judge. He knows how to work the system. Why didn't anyone believe you? Because I stayed too long. Because I went back. Because when it finally went to court, his lawyers made me look like I was just a bitter ex trying to ruin his reputation. She pushed the folder toward me. But I kept everything. Every piece of evidence. I've been waiting for him to do this to someone else. Waiting to prove I wasn't lying. I took the folder with shaking hands. Why didn't you come forward when he started dating me? Because I didn't know until now. He's careful. He waits a while between victims. Makes sure there's no obvious pattern. I called 3 more women that week. Found them through Lisa, through social media, through careful detective work. 4 women total, not counting me. All with similar stories, charming at first, controlling later, violent eventually. All dismissed, discredited, made to feel crazy. David had a system, and the system had protected him. Marcus tried to stop me, said I was putting myself in danger, that I should let the lawyers handle it. The lawyers are handling it by trying to send you back to prison. Better me than you getting hurt. I grabbed his face, forced him to look at me. Stop acting like you're the only one who gets to make sacrifices. You showed me what it looks like to face your mistakes and build something better. Now let me show you what it looks like when someone chooses to stand beside you. We compiled everything: medical records, police reports, witness statements, text messages the other women had saved, a pattern of abuse spanning 7 years, evidence that David had connections who made charges disappear, who pressured women into dropping cases. I hired a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who specialized in domestic violence cases and had a reputation for going after men who thought they were untouchable. This is good, Patricia said, reviewing our evidence. This is really good. But you need to be prepared. He's going to come after you. After both of you. I know. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. Marcus would testify. I would testify. Lisa and 2 other women agreed to testify. Wednesday night, my phone rang. Unknown number. Drop the case. Not David's voice. Someone else. Deeper. Older. Who is this? A friend. Drop the case against David Montgomery, or we'll make sure your boyfriend goes back inside. And we'll make sure you regret ever meeting him. The line went dead. I looked at Marcus across the room. He'd heard enough to understand. I saw him start to speak, probably to tell me to walk away, to save myself, to let him take the fall. Instead, I said the only thing that mattered. I'm not dropping anything. We end this. Together. His expression shifted. Relief, fear, gratitude all mixed together. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. We dressed carefully. Marcus in slacks and a button-down that covered most of his tattoos. Me in a conservative dress that made me look professional and credible. We drove to the courthouse in silence. And when we walked through those doors, David was waiting. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights, worn carpet, benches that had held too many broken people telling their stories. David sat at the defendant's table in an expensive suit, looking every inch the successful businessman wronged by circumstances. His lawyer was polished, confident, the kind that charged $500 an hour. But Lisa was there, and the other women, and Patricia, with our folder of evidence so thick it barely closed. The hearing lasted 4 hours. David's lawyer tried to make it about Marcus. His record, his violence, his presence in my life as proof that I was unstable, attracted to dangerous men. He painted me as a woman who couldn't tell the difference between protection and abuse. Then Patricia stood up. One by one, she called us to testify. Lisa went first, calm and steady, showing her medical records and explaining how David's family connections had made her restraining order disappear. The second woman, Amanda, described the same pattern of control and escalation. The third, Jennifer, had photos that made the bailiff look away. Then it was my turn. I told them everything. The first shove, the backhand that left my eye swollen, the texts, the stalking, the parking garage with his hired muscle. I showed them the bruises I'd photographed, the voicemails I'd saved, the timeline of escalation. And Marcus Chen? The judge asked. How does he factor into this? He saved my life. Multiple times, without ever once breaking the law. David's lawyer objected, tried to redirect, but the damage was done. Marcus testified last, not angry, not defensive, just honest. I made a terrible choice 7 years ago. I hurt someone badly, and I served my time. I took classes. I changed. Every single day, I choose to be different than I was. He looked directly at the judge. Sarah didn't need me to be violent. She needed me to be present, to document, to trust the system I'd stopped believing in. And that's what I did. The ruling came 2 hours later. David's complaint against Marcus was dismissed. The evidence we'd provided was forwarded to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Marcus's parole status remained unchanged, but David wasn't arrested. His lawyer negotiated bail before the ink was dry. He walked out of that courthouse the same way he'd walked in, free, angry, and convinced he'd eventually win. Justice wasn't clean, It wasn't Hollywood, but it was real. Marcus and I stood on the courthouse steps afterward, the Seattle rain starting to fall. He looked exhausted, like he'd been holding his breath for days. You didn't have to risk everything for me. I took his hand, his skin warm, rough from work, solid. Yes, I did. Because you showed me that people can change. That mistakes don't define you unless you let them. I looked up at him. This man who'd seen the worst of humanity and still chose kindness. Because when everyone told me to run, you were the only one who made me want to stay. 3 months later, we were still building our life together. He got promoted to assistant manager at the store. I started therapy, real therapy, to deal with everything David had done. We moved to a bigger apartment, our apartment, both our names on the lease. People still judged. His past still followed him. But we had something real. Trust built on truth, love built on respect, and second chances we'd both earned the hard way. Redemption wasn't something you achieved alone. It was something you built with people who chose to see you, really see you, past every label and judgment. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.